I guess, though, the elephant in the room that I have to bring up, Joe, and the Mets haven't really had much contact in bringing him back, but what do you think of Jose Quintana in all of this? Because there's the part of me that looks at this and goes, I want to see what you establish this depth all offseason to see what they have, right? I just because Montas gets hurt and somebody was going to get hurt. Went through this with Senga last year. It doesn't mean that, oh God, now we have to press pull the emergency lever. No, you have McGill, you have Canning, you have guys on this roster that could be starters for a reason. But I will say this, Joe, there's the other side of me that not only as a Jose Quintana fan, I feel like bringing him in, there is no downside. It's not expensive. If he has nothing in the tank, you kind of just move on from him being in your rotation. And Quintana, as we talked about on the last show, was incredible for this team the last, 6 weeks of the season or whatever it was, really obviously the postseason is what I'm talking about. What are your thoughts surrounding Quintana right now, Joe, who somehow still doesn't have a job, which is unbelievable?
It is surprising he doesn't have a job. I look at Quintana and I look at Andrew Heaney, who is also still hanging out there as a free agent, as two guys that I think would be worthwhile for the Mets to make a call to. While there are things I like about Paul Blackburn, he's ultimately a number 5 type of starter. While there are things that I think are interesting about Griffin Canning, and his 2023, I think, was a little bit of a better sign of what you can hope for out of him. He is coming off a year where he was literally the worst starting pitcher in baseball. So the expectations are naturally a little lower there. And Tyler McGill is equipped for this situation, as you mentioned, but this is now the 3rd or 4th opportunity to find his way into the rotation due to injury. And it's been an up and down road for McGill. There's no way around that. And every year we get mailbag questions and we talk about, when is Tyler McGill getting moved to the bullpen? And that's obviously not in the cards right now. Even though I don't know it would be a significant upgrade from what they currently have, I would not be opposed to a Quintana or Andrew Heaney, who I think are guys that you can look at and say, they're going to throw you 150 innings.
Right.
And the Mets could use some of that stability on the back end of the rotation, which I know it's crazy to say, but Frankie Montas, coming off the amount of innings that he threw in 2024, he was almost looked at as that back end guy who could give some innings. So definitely would call Quintana, definitely would call Andrew Heaney. And if the price is right, and that's important, I know people don't want to hear it. Everyone just knows Steve Cohen is worth $20 billion. So money should be no object anytime ever. But now that they are back into the Cohen tax, remember, everything is 110% of every dollar. So if you give Jose Quintana $6 million, you're paying him more like $13 million if you get, and down the line. So just something that they have to consider if the investment is worth it. But at this point, I'd be interested in getting some innings in the room.
The glass half full outlook to me, that's just funny, right? I'm not sitting here saying losing Frankie Montas is fine. That's not the point at all. But it is funny to me, Joe, that if you just blind read these numbers, 16 games last year, 15 of the appearances were starts, 4.04 ERA, struck out 10.5 over 9. You'd be like, man, I think I'd love that from Frankie Montas this year. That was Tyler McGill's numbers last year. So that's why it's just funny to me that I'd rather Frankie Montas be healthy and in this rotation. But I do think that's probably their line of thinking, Joe, where it's, we don't need, I think if you had one more injury, Heaney and Quintana would come into a top of the conversation, and this can happen. It's baseball and it's pitching. But I do think there is a comfort level with you're playing the numbers with arms. This is definitely a Stearns approach. I think the thought process is, and Paul Blackburn, you brought this up, is a little difficult to project because of the injury, and we just don't have a concrete timeline of when he'll be himself again. But you'd like to think one of McGill, Canning, or Blackburn can fill the void as a number 5 for a couple months of your season. Like, you're playing the numbers of one of those 3 being capable of filling that role.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. If this was Sean Manaea going down for an extended period of time, or Kodai Senga going down again for an extended period of time, the conversation might be a little different. The Mets signed Frankie Montas to be a back-end starter, so you're replacing a back-end starter with a different back-end starter that maybe just fans are not as excited about, the potential of. But either way, the Mets season, if it's defined by losing Frankie Montas, then this team was simply just not built the way we thought it was.